The train to nowhere. A Hercule Poirot and Miss Marple mystery. Paddington Station. The fog had descended upon London with the methodical persistence of an unwelcome guest who knows he cannot be turned away. It pressed against the great glass roof of Paddington Station, transforming the iron and steel into something ghostly, insubstantial. The gas lamps burned with halos of moisture, and the voices of porters calling out platform numbers seemed to come from very far away, as though filtered through layers of wet wool. Hercule Poirot stood beneath the station clock, a small, egg-shaped figure of such sartorial perfection that he seemed to exist in defiance of the general dampness. His mustaches, those magnificent mustaches, were waxed to point so sharp they might have served as weapons. His patent leather shoes reflected the lamplight. His green eyes, sharp as broken glass, surveyed the platform with the methodical attention of a man who believes that disorder is a personal insult from the universe. In his gloved hand, he held a telegram. He had read it 17 times since receiving it at his flat in Whitehaven Mansions, and with each reading his perplexity had grown. The message was unsigned, already irregular. It read, * your immediate discretion required. Matter of delicacy aboard 11:45 to Nowhere Hollow. Compartment 4, first class. Come alone, *. Come alone, Poirot murmured, his accent caressing the words with that peculiar precision that made even English sound like a foreign language. Always they say this, as though Hercule Poirot travels with an entourage like a film star? Absurd. And yet, the telegram intrigued him. The phrasing suggested education, but also anxiety. The sender knew his name, knew his reputation, but wished to remain anonymous. Why? What delicate matter required his immediate discretion on a train bound for a town whose very name suggested absence, negation, emptiness? Nowhere Hollow. He spoke the name aloud, tasting it. A town that is nowhere, a hollow that is empty. Already it does not please me. The station clock struck the 3/4 hour. 11:45. The whistle shrieked, a sound like a woman screaming in the fog. Poirot boarded. The corridor of the first-class carriage smelled of beeswax polish, old velvet, and something else, something faint, floral, almost medicinal. Lavender water, perhaps applied with too heavy a hand. The carpet beneath his feet was burgundy, thick as moss. The mahogany panels gleamed. And yet something was wrong. His mustaches twitched. His little gray cells, those magnificent cells, stirred uneasily. A porter's cap lay discarded beneath the luggage rack, not tossed carelessly, but placed, hidden almost. The lamp in the corridor, though recently polished to a high shine, had been dimmed until it barely illuminated the passage. And there, at the base of the wall, so faint he almost missed it, a smear, dark, reddish-brown. Poirot bent, examined it without touching. Blood, recently cleaned, but not thoroughly enough. Someone had been in a hurry. Curious, he murmured. Most curious. He found compartment 4 and slid open the door. The compartment was upholstered in burgundy velvet, warm and close. The lamps were lit, casting a golden glow that might have been cozy if not for the fog pressing against the windows like a living thing. Already seated, her hands moving with the mechanical precision of long practice, was an elderly lady knitting what appeared to be a blue scarf. She looked up as he entered, and Poirot experienced something he rarely felt. Surprise. The woman was elderly, 70 perhaps, or more. She wore a sensible traveling dress of gray tweed, a cameo brooch at her throat, and spectacles that caught the lamplight. Her white hair was arranged in soft curls beneath a modest hat. Everything about her suggested respectability, gentility, and the sort of harmless elderly spinsterhood that England produced in such abundance. Everything, that is, except her eyes. Her eyes were bright, sharp, and utterly undeceived. They were the eyes of someone who had spent a lifetime observing human nature and had found it endlessly fascinating and frequently disappointing. "Good evening," she said. Her voice was soft, cultured, with the faintest burr of the West Country. "How fortunate. I do so dislike traveling alone. The fog makes everything feel so uncertain, don't you think?" Poirot settled into the seat opposite with a precise arrangement of his person. Coat smooth, hat placed just so on the rack above, walking stick position at the perfect angle. "Mademoiselle, I must apologize for the intrusion. I was told this compartment." "Oh, I'm quite certain we're meant to share it, Mr. Poirot. The railway company does so hate to waste space, even in first class." She smiled, a gentle expression that somehow conveyed both innocence and complete awareness. "You are Mr. Hercule Poirot, are you not? I recognized you from your photographs in the newspapers. One does read them, even in St. Mary Mead." "St. Mary Mead?" "A small village, quite unremarkable. I've lived there for, longer than I care to calculate." She returned her attention to her knitting, the needles clicking with soft, rhythmic precision. "I am Miss Marple, Miss Jane Marple. And before you ask, yes, I am also traveling to Nowhere Hollow, and no, I cannot quite explain why." Poirot's eyebrows rose a fraction of an inch. For him, a dramatic expression of surprise. "You also have been summoned?" "Not summoned. Requested." She completed a row, turned her work, began another. "I received a letter 3 days ago from an old friend, Mrs. Finch. She was governess to the Harrington family. A dear woman, very loyal, perhaps too loyal. She wrote that she needed what she called moral assistance. Rather a curious phrase, don't you think? Not help, precisely. Not advice. Moral assistance. And you did not find this strange." "I found it very strange indeed, Mr. Poirot, which is precisely why I came." She glanced up, her eyes meeting his. "One learns in a long life that when something feels wrong, it usually is wrong. And Mrs. Finch is not a woman given to dramatics. If she asks for moral assistance, then something morally troubling is occurring." The train lurched into motion. Slowly, ponderously, the great engine pulled them away from the platform, away from the station, into the fog. The world outside the window dissolved into gray nothing. For several minutes, they traveled in silence. Miss Marple knitted. Poirot stared at the window, seeing only his own reflection, and beyond it, the void. But his mind was not still. His little gray cells arranged and rearranged the facts. The unsigned telegram, the blood in the corridor, the porter's cap, the dimmed lamp, the smell of lavender water. And now this, an elderly spinster from a village called St. Mary Mead, summoned by a governess to provide moral assistance. "You are troubled, Mr. Poirot." He turned to find her watching him with those sharp, kind eyes. "Not troubled, mademoiselle. Merely attentive." "That's what I said, dear." She examined a stitch with great concentration. "You've noticed something already. Several somethings, I expect. You have that look about you, like a terrier that's caught a scent." Despite himself, Poirot smiled. "You are observant, mademoiselle. I spent 40 years teaching young girls at the village school. One develops certain skills. The ability to know when someone is hiding something, for instance, or lying, or deeply afraid." She paused, let the silence stretch. The conductor who checked our tickets was afraid. Did you notice? His hands trembled. More than that, he looked at the corridor behind us as though expecting something terrible to appear, and he checked our names against his list twice, as though memorizing them. Her needles never stopped their clicking. One wonders why. One wonders many things, mademoiselle. Call me Miss Marple, please. And may I call you Mr. Poirot? I feel we're going to become quite well acquainted before this journey ends. I suspect you are correct. He leaned forward slightly. Tell me, Miss Marple, what do you know of the Harrington family? Very little, I'm afraid. Mrs. Finch mentioned them in her letters over the years. Lord Charles Harrington, a military man, quite respectable but perhaps a touch old-fashioned. His wife, Lady Isabel, much younger, very beautiful. Mrs. Finch was devoted to her, practically raised her after her own mother died. Then there are the usual household staff, a manor house falling into disrepair. She trailed off. The sort of family one finds in every corner of England, really. Genteel poverty hiding behind old names and older pride. You said Mrs. Finch was devoted to Lady Isabel. Almost unhealthily so, if I'm honest. There was a quality to her letters when she wrote about the young lady. Protective, yes, but also worried. The sort of worry one has about someone making terrible mistakes. Miss Marple's voice softened. I knew a woman in St. Mary Mead once, Mrs. Bantry, whose maid was devoted to her daughter. When the daughter began an unsuitable liaison with a married man, the maid went extraordinary lengths to conceal it. Lying, stealing correspondence, even falsifying appointments. She believed she was protecting her young mistress. In fact, she was enabling her destruction. You think Mrs. Finch is concealing something? I think Mrs. Finch is very afraid of something being revealed. There's a difference. Poirot sat back, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. You are a woman of considerable insight, Miss Marple. I'm a woman who has lived a long time in a small village, Mr. Poirot, and I've learned that human nature is much the same everywhere. The passions, the sins, the desperate measures people take when cornered, they play out in St. Mary Mead just as they do in London or Paris or Constantinople. The only difference is the scale. Her needles paused, and sometimes not even that. The train swayed, a gentle rocking that might have been soothing if not for the growing sense of unease. The fog pressed closer. The lamps flickered. And then Poirot smelled it, sharp, metallic, unmistakable. Blood. He rose in one fluid motion, opened the compartment door, stepped into the corridor. Miss Marple was immediately behind him, her knitting abandoned. The corridor was empty. The lamp still burned low, but the smell was stronger here, mixing with the lavender water into something grotesque. Mr. Poirot. Miss Marple's voice was steady but quiet. Look there. She pointed to the carpet. A trail, faint but visible in the dim light. Droplets, leading toward the rear of the train. Poirot followed it, Miss Marple at his side. Neither spoke. The only sound was the rhythm of wheels on rails, and from somewhere ahead, a soft, rhythmic thumping. They reached the connection between carriages. The door to the baggage car stood slightly ajar. Poirot pushed it open. The sight that met them was one that will remain etched in their memories for the remainder of their lives, not for violence, but for its terrible neatness. Albert Crouch, senior steward of the 11:45 express, lay on his back among the leather trunks and hat boxes. His uniform was immaculate save for the dark flower blooming across his chest. His cap sat beside him, carefully placed. His eyes were open, staring at nothing, and in his right hand, clutched with the desperation of a dying man, was a crumpled piece of paper. From his chest protruded a letter opener, silver, ornately carved, gleaming even in death. Miss Marple made a soft sound, halfway between a sigh and a prayer. Poirot knelt beside the body, his movements gentle, respectful. He has been dead perhaps 30 minutes. No more. The blood is still tacky, not yet dried. The body remains warm. Professional? Examine the wound, mademoiselle. What do you observe? Miss Marple approached, her face pale but composed. She had seen death before. Village life, for all its seeming innocence, was not without its tragedies. The letter opener is buried deep, between the ribs, I should think. But the angle, she tilted her head. It's slightly off, not the clean strike of some unpracticed. Precisement. This was not the work of an assassin, but of someone driven by desperation. See how the handle bears the imprint of fingers. They gripped it with such force that the metal has left marks on the wood beneath. This was not a calm murder. This was panic made lethal. He lifted the letter opener carefully, holding it to the light. Engraved upon the silver handle was an elaborate crest, a lion rampant above crossed swords, and beneath, in flowing script, Harrington. Lord Harrington's crest, Miss Marple said softly. Mrs. Finch described it in one of her letters. The family motto is inscribed on the reverse. Honor above all. Rather ironic, under the circumstances. Poirot turned the opener over. There, as she'd said, were the words, honor above all. Honor, he murmured. Always. It is honor that men speak of loudest when they have the least of it. He returned his attention to the body, gently pried open the clenched fingers. The paper came free reluctantly, as though even in death, Albert Crouch was unwilling to release it. Poirot unfolded it carefully. The message was brief, written in a feminine hand that suggested education and breeding. Asterisk meet me. Midnight. Urgent. Say nothing. Asterisk. No signature. No further explanation. A rendezvous, Miss Marple said. But midnight hasn't come yet. It's barely past 9. The killer could not wait for midnight. Perhaps they feared discovery. Perhaps they feared what Mr. Crouch might say before then. Poirot stood, his face grave. But see here, the paper is expensive. Heavy stock, cream-colored, with a watermark. This is not the sort of paper a steward would possess. This comes from a writing desk in a wealthy home, or from a first-class passenger's personal stationery. So the killer is someone of means, or someone with access to such a person's belongings. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of murder settling upon them like the fog outside. Then, from the corridor behind them, came a voice, young, nervous, stammering. Sir, I must ask you to. Oh, God, oh, dear God, it's true. The train guard stood in the doorway, his face the color of old paper. He was barely 20, with spots still peppering his chin and the sort of thin mustache young men grow in hopes of appearing older. At this moment, he looked about 12. It's true, he repeated, his voice breaking. Albert's dead. They said, the porter saw blood, but I thought it was a mistake. I thought... Steady yourself, young man. Poirot's voice was firm but kind. What is your name? T. Thomas, sir. Thomas Wickham. Junior guard on this service. Very well, Thomas. You'll compose yourself and you will tell me. When did you last see Albert Crouch alive? 9 o'clock, sir. He was completing the evening tea service. He had trays for the first-class compartments. Lord Harrington's, Mr. Pike's, Lady Harrington's. He swallowed hard. He was in perfect health. Whistling, even, he always whistled when he worked. Said it kept the passengers calm. And after 9 o'clock, I was in the guard's van, sir, checking the cargo manifest. The fog was worsening, and we received word there might be delays ahead. When I came back to the passenger carriages, I found the porter, Jenkins, in a state. He said he'd seen blood in the corridor. I thought he was drunk. He's been known to nip from the passengers' bottles. But then I saw it myself. And then you found... He couldn't finish. The train, Poirot said. When did it stop? Just after 9:20, sir. Emergency signal from the engineer. He thought he saw something on the tracks, likely just fog and shadows. But we couldn't risk it. We've been stopped here ever since, waiting for the signal to clear. His voice dropped to a whisper. But the telegraph lines are down. The fog's too thick. We can't reach the next station. We're trapped here until dawn. Miss Marple and Poirot exchanged glances. How many passengers aboard? Poirot asked. First class? 8, including yourselves. Second class is nearly empty, just 3 passengers. And third is half full, but they're all in the forward carriages, separated from first by the dining car. Thomas's eyes were wide, frightened. You think one of the passengers did this? I think, mon ami, that the killer is aboard this train, and they know they cannot escape, which makes them very dangerous indeed. Poirot straightened his coat. You will secure this carriage. No one enters except myself or Miss Marple, and you will summon all first-class passengers to the dining car. Tell them there has been an incident that requires their immediate attention. Shouldn't we wait for the police? For proper authorities? I am the proper authority, Thomas. I am Hercule Poirot. He said it without arrogance, simply as fact. And I will not permit a murderer to walk free among innocent people until dawn. Comprenez-vous? Yes, sir. At once, sir. As Thomas hurried away, Miss Marple turned to Poirot. Her face was thoughtful, troubled. A murder planned yet executed in panic, she said. A message promising a midnight meeting, but the victim dies at 9. A weapon bearing Lord Harrington's crest, but used by someone desperate and unskilled. She shook her head. Nothing quite fits, does it, Mr. Poirot? Non, which suggests we are not yet seeing the true picture. We see only what the killer wishes us to see. His eyes gleamed. But we shall uncover the truth, Miss Marple. We shall arrange the facts, apply the little gray cells, and we shall know. Because the truth, however well hidden, always leaves traces, like footprints in snow, or blood on a carpet, or a letter opener with a family motto. Miss Marple added quietly, honor above all. I wonder if the killer appreciated the irony. I wonder, Poirot said, if the killer knew the meaning of honor at all. The company of suspects. The first-class dining car had been transformed from a space of quiet elegance into something resembling a courtroom, or perhaps a confessional. The crystal chandeliers swayed gently with the train's breathing, casting nervous shadows across the white linen tablecloths. Silver gleamed, glass sparkled, and 6 passengers sat in various states of unease, waiting. Lord Charles Harrington occupied the head of the table, as though by divine right. He was a man of perhaps 55, with the bearing of a military officer and the face of someone who has drunk too much brandy for too many years. His cheeks were webbed with broken veins. His eyes, once sharp, had gone rheumy, but his voice still carried command. Lord Harrington spoke first, his voice grudging. I was in the smoking car from 8:30 onwards. playing cards with Pike here. Jenkins, a porter, was serving drinks. He can confirm it. Mr. Pike? Pike nodded frantically. Yes, I was there. We played until, perhaps 9:30? Then I returned to my compartment to review my documents. His voice dropped, which is when I discovered they'd been tampered with. Moved, disturbed, possibly copied. He looked ill. I can't be certain, but I had them arranged in a specific order, and when I returned they were wrong. All wrong. Could someone have stolen them? I can't. If they were stolen, I'm ruined. My career's over. The ministry will... He stopped, breathing hard. I need to check again. I need to be certain. You will remain here, monsieur, until I give you permission to leave. Poirot's voice was steel. Mr. Ashcroft? Where were you? Ashcroft closed his notebook, set down his pen. I was conducting research, moving through the train, observing the passengers, taking notes. I'm writing a novel, as I mentioned. The ambience of fog-bound journey struck me as essential to capture the isolation, the sense of being cut off from the world. Did anyone see you? I imagine several people did. I wasn't hiding. I spoke briefly with Miss Dunn in the corridor near the second-class carriages. She accused me of spying. I assured her I was merely working. And you, Miss Dunn? You confirm this. Miss Dunn's lips thinned. I saw him, peering through the glass doors, scribbling in that notebook. Unnatural, I call it. People should mind their own business, not go about staring at others. I was visiting my sister in second class. She's traveling with me to Nowhere Hollow. She's ill, and I want to check on her. What time was this? Just after 9, perhaps 9:10. I returned to my compartment by 9:20. And you saw no one else in corridors? Only the steward, Albert Crouch. He was carrying a tea tray. I remember thinking it was rather late for tea service, but perhaps someone had requested it specially. She paused. He was heading toward the rear carriages, toward Lady Harrington's compartment. All eyes turned to Lady Isabel. She'd gone very pale. Yes. He brought me tea. I didn't request it, but he said the kitchen had extra and thought I might like it. He was always thoughtful that way. What time was this? 9 o'clock, perhaps a few minutes after. And did you speak with him? Only briefly. I thanked him. She hesitated. He asked if I was well. He seemed concerned about something, but I was tired, and I asked him to leave the tray and go. I didn't want conversation. Did he leave immediately? Yes. No, wait. He lingered a moment. He said, her voice dropped to barely a whisper. He said, "Be careful, my lady. Not everything that glitters is gold." I didn't understand what he meant. I thought perhaps he was feeling unwell, talking strangely. So I asked him to leave, and he did. Miss Marple's needles had stopped. How curious. Not everything that glitters is gold. That's almost like a warning, wouldn't you say, Mr. Poirot? Indeed, mademoiselle. A warning about deception, about things or people not being what they appear. He turned back to Lady Isabel. And after he left, what did you do? I drank my tea. I read for a while. Then I heard the train stop suddenly, and there was commotion in the corridor. She looked up, her eyes pleading. That's all. I swear it. I had nothing to do with this terrible thing. No one has accused you, Lady Harrington. Not yet, Ashcroft murmured, then shook his head at Poirot's sharp glance. Forgive me. Professional instinct. In my novels, the spouse is always the first suspect. This is not a novel, monsieur. This is murder. Poirot turned to Mrs. Finch. And you, madam? Where were you at 9:15? Mrs. Finch had regained some composure, though her hands still clutched her handkerchief. I was in my compartment. I share it with Lady Isabel. I serve as her lady's companion when we travel. But I was feeling unwell, the motion of the train, and I'd taken a powder for my headache. I was lying down when I heard the commotion. You saw nothing? Heard nothing unusual? Nothing. I'm so sorry. I wish I could help. You can help, madam, by telling me the truth. You summoned Miss Marple here because you feared something. What was it? Mrs. Finch's eyes darted to Lady Isabel, then away. It wasn't anything specific, just a feeling, a sense that something was wrong. Lady Isabel seemed distressed, secretive. I thought perhaps Miss Marple, with her experience. She stopped. Her experience with what? Poirot pressed. With village matters, with helping people in difficult situations. This is not a village matter, Mrs. Finch. This is murder. I didn't know there would be murder. The words burst from her. I only knew something was wrong, and I want to help before it became worse. But I never imagined. She buried her face in her hands, her shoulders shaking. Lady Isabel rose, went to her, put a hand on her shoulder. It's all right, Mrs. Finch. No one blames you. But Poirot noticed a look that passed between them, a look of fear, of shared secrets, of loyalty strained to breaking. He turned to the group. One more question. The letter opener that killed Albert Crouch. Where's Lord Harrington's writing case now? In my compartment. Locked. Then we shall examine it together. Poirot gestured to the young guard, Thomas, who stood nervously by the door. Please escort Lord Harrington to his compartment and bring the writing case here. As they waited, Miss Marple spoke quietly. Mr. Poirot, may I ask, was there anything else found with the body? The note, mademoiselle, requesting a midnight meeting. Yes, but I mean, was there anything else? Any other object, any other clue? Poirot's eyes narrowed. Why do you ask? Because in my experience, Mr. Poirot, when someone is stabbed with a personal item, a letter opener from a writing case, for instance, the murderer usually has a reason for choosing that particular weapon. It's not merely convenience. It's symbolism or misdirection. You think the killer chose a letter opener deliberately to implicate Lord Harrington? Or to make us think that's what they were doing? Misdirection within misdirection. Miss Marple resumed her knitting. There was a case in St. Mary Mead, Mrs. Prothero's emerald brooch. It went missing, and everyone assumed the new parlor maid had stolen it. But it turned out Mrs. Prothero herself had hidden it to cover the fact that she'd already sold it months before to pay gambling debts. The theft was staged to explain an absence that already existed. You suggest the letter opener was already gone before the murder? I suggest we don't yet know the whole story of that letter opener, Mr. Poirot. And until we do, we're seeing only shadows on the wall of Plato's cave. Before Poirot could respond, Lord Harrington returned with Thomas, carrying a mahogany writing case with brass corners. The monogram, Ch, gleamed in the lamplight. Here. Harrington set it on the table with a thump. You'll see the lock's been picked. I noticed it 3 days ago. Poirot examined the lock carefully. The scratches were fresh, the mechanism damaged. Someone had indeed forced it open, though with some skill. It was not a brutal breaking, but a careful manipulation. He opened the case. Inside were sheets of personal stationery, envelopes bearing the Harrington crest, several pens, a stick of sealing wax, and an empty velvet-lined slot clearly meant for the missing letter opener. When exactly did you notice the letter opener was gone? Poirot asked. As I said, 3 days ago at Victoria Station. I was going to write a letter during the journey and discovered it missing. And before that, when had you last used it? Harrington frowned, thinking, a week ago? Perhaps longer. I don't use it frequently. It was a gift from my late father, more sentimental than practical. Who else knew of this gift? Its significance? My wife, Mrs. Finch, the household staff at Harrington Hall. He paused. Why does that matter? Because, monsieur, the choice of weapon is never accidental. If someone stole your letter opener to use as a murder weapon, they either wish to implicate you or they wish to send a message. Honor above all, your family motto. Perhaps the killer found that motto ironic. Harrington's face flushed dangerously. Are you suggesting? I am suggesting nothing. I am merely observing. Poirot closed the case. Tell me, were you aware that your wife received a tea service at 9 o'clock this evening? I what? No. Why should I be? Because, Lord Harrington, the tea tray bore 2 cups. Yet your wife was alone. The silence that followed was profound. Lady Isabel had gone white as chalk. There must be some mistake. I only use 1 cup. Perhaps the kitchen sent 2 by habit. The kitchen does not send 2 cups by habit to a passenger traveling alone, Poirot said gently. No, madam. Someone expected company in your compartment, or someone wished to make it appear that you expected company. This is absurd. Lord Harrington's voice shook. Isabel, what is he suggesting? I don't know. I swear I don't know. She turned to Mrs. Finch desperately. Tell them I wouldn't. But Mrs. Finch had covered her face with her hands, and her silence spoke louder than words. Mr. Ashcroft had stopped taking notes. He sat very still, his face carefully blank. But Poirot saw the tension in his shoulders, the white-knuckled grip on his pen. Perhaps, Poirot said quietly, we should discuss the matter of Lady Harrington's locked valise. Secrets and lies. The locked valise sat on the dining table like an accusation. It was small, leather, expensive, the sort of case a lady might use for jewelry or personal correspondence. Lady Isabel had carried it with her when she'd been summoned to the dining car, clutching it as though it contained her very soul. Now, under Poirot's steady gaze, she clutched it still. Lady Harrington, Poirot said, his voice gentle but implacable, I must ask you open the valise. No, my dear, if you refuse, it will look very suspicious indeed. I don't care how it looks. What's inside is private, personal. It has nothing to do with this terrible murder. Lord Harrington reached for the valise. Isabel, for God's sake. She pulled away from him, her eyes blazing with sudden defiance. No, Charles, not even you, especially not you. The words hung in the air like smoke. Miss Marple spoke, her voice soft as snowfall. Lady Harrington, I wonder if I might speak with you privately? Woman to woman, as it were. Just for a moment. Poirot inclined his head. That is perhaps wise. Lady Isabel looked between them, then nodded mutely. Miss Marple rose, and together they moved to the far end of the dining car, out of earshot. In the strained silence that followed, Ashcroft cleared his throat. Quite the drama. The wronged husband, the secretive wife, the mysterious valise. If I put this in a novel, my editor will reject it as too melodramatic. And yet, Poirot observed, here we are. Reality, monsieur, often exceeds fiction in its capacity for melodrama. Indeed. Ashcroft reopened his notebook, but his hand trembled slightly. Tell me, Mr. Poirot, in your experience, when a woman refuses to reveal the content of a locked case, what is she usually hiding? Evidence of infidelity. Pike blurted out, then flushed. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. It's just that in the ministry, we see such cases. Divorce proceedings, scandal. Usually it's letters, love letters, or blackmail material. Miss Dunn added primly. Not that I would know personally, but one reads the newspapers. These modern women with their secrets in there. She stopped, pursed her lips. Well, it's not my place to judge. Lord Harrington had gone very quiet. He stared at his hands, his face gray. Lord Harrington. Poirot said quietly, "Did you know your wife was unhappy?" The question hung in the air for a long moment. "Yes," Harrington finally said. "Yes, I knew. I'm not blind, whatever she thinks. She's 30 years younger than I am. Beautiful, intelligent. She married me for security, for position. I understood that. I thought affection might grow in time, but it didn't." He looked up, his eyes bleak. "And now you're telling me she's taken a lover, and that somehow Albert Crouch knew about it, and..." His voice broke. "Christ, this is my fault, isn't it? For being old and drunk and drowning in debt. For being everything she never wanted. Lord Harrington," Mrs. Finch began, but he waved her silent. "No, don't defend me, Mrs. Finch. We both know the truth. You've always known." He turned to Poirot. "If Isabel killed that steward to protect some sordid affair, I'll not stop you from investigating. I'll not protect her. But I'll not condemn her either. That's for the law to decide." "You are a man of honor after all, monsieur," Poirot said softly. "Honor?" Harrington laughed bitterly. "Honor above all. What a joke. My father will be ashamed." At the far end of the car, Miss Marple and Lady Isabel stood close together, speaking in low voices. Lady Isabel's face was wet with tears. Miss Marple held both her hands, speaking with quiet intensity. Finally, Lady Isabel nodded. They returned to the table, and Lady Isabel placed a valise before Poirot. Her hands shook as she produced a small key from her bodice. "Miss Marple has convinced me that concealment will only make matters worse," she said, her voice barely audible. "But I want you to know, whatever you find in here has nothing to do with Albert Crouch's death. I swear it on my life." She unlocked the valise and stepped back. Poirot opened it carefully. Inside were letters, dozens of them tied with ribbon, personal stationery, passionate declarations, and signed, every one with a single initial, L. Lord Harrington made a sound like he'd been struck. Poirot lifted one letter, scanned it quickly, then another. His face remained impassive, but his eyes flickered toward Ashcroft, whose own face had gone carefully blank. "These letters," Poirot said quietly, "they span several months. The most recent is dated 2 days ago." He looked up at Lady Isabel. "You intended to end the affair." "Yes." Her voice was stronger now, defiant. "I was going to tell Charles everything when we reached Nowhere Hollow. I was going to ask for a divorce. I know it means scandal, ruin, but I couldn't continue living a lie." She turned to her husband. "Charles, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. But I don't love you. I never did. And pretending was destroying us both." "Who?" Harrington's voice was hollow. "Who is L?" Before she could answer, Ashcroft stood abruptly. "I think we all know the answer to that question." He met Poirot's gaze steadily. "My name is Lionel. And yes, Lady Harrington and I have been conducting an affair. There, It said, "Are you satisfied?" The gas around the table were like small explosions. "Lionel," Lady Isabel's voice was anguished. "You weren't supposed to—" "Wasn't I?" "My dear Isabel, there's no point in concealment now. Mr. Poirot has seen the letters. Lord Harrington deserved the truth." He turned to the older man with something almost like respect. "I'm sorry, Lord Harrington. I'm not proud of what I've done, but I won't compound dishonor with cowardice. How noble of you," Miss Dunn spat, "to seduce another man's wife and then claim honor. I didn't seduce her. We found each other." Ashcroft's voice was quiet. "Two lonely people, trapped in circumstances neither of us chose. Yes, it was wrong. Yes, we should have been stronger. But we weren't. And now—" He stopped, looked at Poirot. "I suppose you think I killed Crouch to protect our secret? Did you?" "No, though I can see how it might appear. A steward discovers the affair, threatens exposure. Yes, that would be motive, but I didn't kill him." His jaw tightened. "I may be an adulterer, Mr. Poirot, but I'm not a murderer." "Then you won't mind telling me where you were precisely between 9 and 9:30 this evening?" "I've already told you. I was moving through the train, conducting research." "Non, you told me you were observing passengers. But where, specifically? With whom did you speak? Who can corroborate your movements?" Ashcroft's confidence wavered. Several people saw me. Miss Dunn, as she mentioned. The porter in second class. A gentleman reading in the smoking car." "What time did Miss Dunn see you?" "Just after 9, she said." "And the gentleman in the smoking car?" "I don't know exactly. 9:15? 9:20. So between 9 and 9:15, no one can account for your movements." "I was working, taking notes." "I didn't—" Ashcroft stopped, his face flushed. "This is absurd. Why would I kill a steward?" "Why indeed?" Poirot murmured. He turned to Lady Isabel. "Madam, when Albert Crouch brought you tea at 9 o'clock, did he mention Mr. Ashcroft?" She hesitated. He said something. I didn't understand it at the time. He said, "Some men collect stories the way others collect butterflies, by pinning down living things." I thought he was speaking philosophically. But now— "He was warning you," Miss Marple said, "about Mr. Ashcroft. He knew about the affair, and he was trying to tell you that your lover might not be what he seemed." Ashcroft had gone very pale. "That's not— I would never—" "You are a writer, Mr. Ashcroft," Poirot said. "You study human weakness. You take notes on people's private moments. You claim it is for your art, but perhaps—" He paused. "Perhaps it is for something else. Something more profitable. You think I'm a blackmailer." Ashcroft's voice was flat. "I think, monsieur, that you are a man who understands the value of secrets. And I think Albert Crouch understood this too." Mrs. Finch spoke suddenly, her voice shaking. "He kept a notebook. Albert did. I saw it once months ago, when I was traveling with Lady Isabel to London. He was writing in it observations about passengers," he said. "Little details that might be useful if questions arose later. He was very conscientious that way. If he knew about the affair, he would have written it down. And where is this notebook now?" Poirot asked. "I don't know. He always carried it with him. In his uniform pocket, I think." Poirot and Miss Marple exchanged glances. They had searched Crouch's body. There had been no notebook. "The killer took it," Miss Marple said quietly, "after the murder. That's why they couldn't leave the body immediately. They had to search for the notebook first." Which means, Poirot added, the killer feared what was written in it, what secrets it contained. His gaze swept the assembled passengers. One of you has that notebook. And that notebook, I think, will tell us who killed Albert Crouch. The search of the first-class compartments took 2 hours. Thomas, the young guard, accompanied Poirot and Miss Marple, his face set with nervous determination. Each passenger was required to open their luggage, their personal effects, submit to inspection with varying degrees of grace. Lord Harrington was brusque but cooperative. His compartment smelled of cigars and brandy, his luggage containing exactly what one would expect: clothes, correspondence regarding estate matters, and a bottle of whiskey half empty. Mr. Pike was agitated, insisting repeatedly that his government documents were confidential and could not be examined in detail. Poirot assured him he had no interest in railway expansion plans, only in objects that didn't belong. Pike's compartment was a chaos of papers, each one meticulously marked and filed. If he had stolen Crouch's notebook, he'd hidden it extraordinarily well. Miss Dunn submitted to the search with tight-lipped disapproval, muttering about privacy and propriety. Her compartment was spare, almost monastic. Sensible clothes, a Bible, letters from her dying sister. Nothing remotely suspicious. Mrs. Finch wept quietly through the entire process, apologizing repeatedly for the inconvenience while wringing her hands. Her belongings were what one might expect a governess: serviceable dresses, a small collection of pressed flowers, letters from Lady Isabel dating back years. Lady Isabel's compartment was last. She stood in the doorway, watching as Poirot carefully examined each item: the expensive dresses, the jewelry, the toiletries. Everything spoke of genteel poverty. Quality items, but old, carefully maintained, repaired. "You will not find anything," she said quietly. "I had nothing to do with this." "And yet, madam, Albert Crouch warned you about Mr. Ashcroft." "Why?" "I don't know. I didn't understand what he meant. Or perhaps you understood perfectly, but you did not wish to believe it." Poirot paused, holding up a small enamel box. "May I?" She nodded. Inside were trinkets: a pressed flower, a theater ticket stub, a single cufflink with the initial L, mementos of a secret love affair. "You kept these," Poirot observed, "even though you planned to end the affair." I thought I might want to remember that it was real, even if it was wrong." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "I've been so lonely, Mr. Poirot. Can you understand that? To be married and yet utterly alone." "I understand many things, madam. But loneliness does not justify murder. I didn't murder anyone." "Perhaps not. But I think you know more than you are telling me." He replaced the box, turned to face her directly. "What did Albert Crouch say to you exactly?" "Word for word." She closed her eyes, remembering. He brought the tea tray. "2 cups, as you said. I thought it was odd, but I didn't question it." He said, "Your tea, my lady." Then he hesitated. He looked troubled. He said, "My lady, I must speak plainly. There are those who prey upon lonely hearts, who collect secrets like others collect coins. Be careful whom you trust." I asked him what he meant, but he just shook his head and said, "Not everything that glitters is gold, my lady. Remember that." She opened her eyes. Then I asked him to leave because I was tired and I didn't want to hear any more. And now he's dead, and I wonder if he died trying to warn me. About Mr. Ashcroft. I suppose so. But Lionel isn't, he wouldn't. She stopped, doubt flickering across her face. Would he? That, Poirot said, is what we must discover. They left her compartment and found Miss Marple waiting in the corridor, her expression thoughtful. "Any luck?" Poirot asked. "No notebook, but I did find something curious in Mr. Ashcroft's compartment." She held up a slim volume. His novel, or rather, his notes for a novel. The manuscript is titled The Blackmailer's Art, and the dedication reads, "To those who understand that knowledge is the only true currency." Poirot took the manuscript, leafed through it. The prose was accomplished, cynical. It told the story of a writer who seduced wealthy women, collected their secrets, and then sold those secrets back to them, or to their enemies. "This is not fiction," Poirot said slowly. "This is confession." "Or instruction," Miss Marple added. "There's a character in St. Mary Mead, Colonel Bantry. He wrote an entire book about theoretical ways to commit fraud, claiming it was for educational purposes. It turned out he was using the book as a manual for his own schemes." She paused. "Mr. Poirot, if Mr. Ashcroft seduced Lady Isabel not for love, but for blackmail material, then Albert Crouch discovering the affair would have been catastrophic." "Indeed, but blackmail requires leverage. What leverage would Ashcroft have against Lady Isabel? She has no fortune of her own. Lord Harrington is ruined financially. What could he gain? Perhaps not money. Perhaps something else." Miss Marple's eyes were distant, thinking. Reputation? Position? Or perhaps... She stopped. Perhaps he was blackmailing someone else entirely, and Lady Isabel was merely the means to access them. "You think he was using Lady Isabel to blackmail Lord Harrington?" "It's possible. Or to gain access to Lord Harrington's connections, his social circle. A titled name, even an impoverished one, opens many doors." Poirot considered this. "We must speak with Mr. Ashcroft again. But first..." He turned to Thomas, who had been following him nervously. "The notebook has not been found in any passenger compartment. Therefore it must be elsewhere. The baggage car, the dining car, the water closet." "The smoking car," Thomas interrupted. "I didn't mention before, but there's a small storage compartment in the smoking car, behind a panel. The stewards use it for storing personal items during their shifts. Albert might have kept his notebook there." "Show me." The smoking car still smelled of tobacco and brandy. The leather chair sat empty, waiting. Thomas led them to the rear wall. Press a hidden catch. A panel swung open, revealing a narrow cubby. Inside were the expected items: spare uniforms, a tin of tobacco, a flask of tea, and there, tucked beneath a folded jacket, a leather notebook bound with string. Poirot lifted it reverently. Albert Crouch's observations. He opened it carefully. The pages were filled with neat, cramped handwriting. Dates, times, passenger names. Details both mundane and revealing. Asterisk Lord H., drinking heavily, even at breakfast. Received a letter from solicitors. Bankruptcy proceedings? Watched wife with sadness, not anger. Asterisk. Asterisk Lady H., distressed, secretive. Received correspondence from London address, Chelsea. Love letter? Hides it quickly when approached. Asterisk. Asterisk Mr. A. Observes everyone but pretends not to. Took notes on Lord H.'s conversation with bank manager in dining car. Why? Also noted speaking privately with Lady H. in corridor. Intimate body language. Asterisk. Asterisk Mr. P. Government papers constantly rearranged, checked, worried over. Seems convinced someone is trying to steal them. Paranoia or reality? Asterisk. And then on the final page, written in a hurried hand very different from the earlier entries, Asterisk must warn Lady H. Mr. and not what he seems. Overheard him speaking to unknown man at Victoria Station before boarding. Mentioned insurance policy and leveraging secrets for advancement. Called Lady H my most successful project yet. He's using her. Must tell her before we reach Nowhere Hollow. Asterisk. Beneath this, a final line, written in an even more desperate scrawl. Asterisk he knows I know. Confronted me in corridor. Said, "You're making a terrible mistake, Crouch." Was that a threat? Must be careful. Asterisk. The time stamp on this entry. 8:45 p.m. Poirot looked up at Miss Marple. Ashcroft knew that Crouch had discovered his scheme, and he knew Crouch intended to warn Lady Isabel. So he lured Crouch to the baggage car with the note supposedly from Lady Isabel, and killed him. But the note said midnight. Why kill him at 9? Because he couldn't wait until midnight. Crouch was going to warn Lady Isabel immediately. Ashcroft had to act. Poirot nodded slowly. We have motive, we have opportunity, but we do not yet have proof. The notebook is circumstantial. The love letters prove the affair, but not the murder. He closed the notebook carefully. We must make Mr. Ashcroft confess. And how do you propose to do that? Poirot's eyes gleamed. By showing him that we know everything. By demonstrating that his careful planning has failed. By making him believe that his only hope is to control the narrative by confessing. He smiled a thin, cold expression. By, in essence, using his own techniques against him. A blackmailer blackmailed? Precisement, mademoiselle. How very appropriate. The trap. They assembled once more in the dining car, but this time the atmosphere was different. The passengers sensed that revelation was at hand. Lord Harrington sat with rigid dignity, his face carefully blank. Lady Isabel dabbed at her eyes with a handkerchief, her gaze fixed on the tablecloth. Mrs. Finch clutched her rosary beads, lips moving in silent prayer. Miss Dunn sat ramrod straight, judgment written across her features. Mr. Pike fidgeted with his spectacles, nervous energy radiating from him like heat. And Mr. Lionel Ashcroft lounged in his chair with studied casualness, but his eyes, those intelligent, cynical eyes, never left Poirot. Ladies and gentlemen, Poirot began, standing at the head of the table with Miss Marple seated to his right. I have asked you to return here, because I have solved the murder of Albert Crouch. Silence, absolute and breathless. The solution, it is both simple and complex. Simple in its mechanism, a desperate stabbing in a moment of panic. Complex in its motivation, a web of deception, manipulation, and calculated cruelty. He paused, let his gaze sweep across them. But let's begin at the beginning. He placed a leather notebook on the table. This belonged to Albert Crouch. In it, he recorded his observations of the passengers he served. Not gossip, you understand, but the sort of careful notation that comes from years of service, of watching, of understanding that knowledge protects both servant and master. Pike leaned forward, squinting at the notebook. What sort of observations? The sort that reveals secrets, Mr. Pike. For instance, he noted that you rearrange your government papers constantly, checking them, counting them. He wondered if you had reason to fear theft, or if the papers themselves were not what they seemed. Pike went white. The papers are genuine, I assure you. I'm sure they are, monsieur. But Albert Crouch noted your paranoia, and he wondered at its source. He was, you see, a man who understood that fear reveals truth. Poirot turned the pages. He also noted Lord Harrington's drinking, his sadness, his financial troubles. He noted Lady Harrington's secretive correspondence, her hidden distress, and he noted Mr. Ashcroft's unusual behavior, the constant observation, the note-taking, the private conversations. Ashcroft's expression didn't change, but his hand tightened on his pen. Albert Crouch was not merely observant. Poirot continued. He was perceptive. He understood patterns. And he recognized eventually what Mr. Ashcroft was doing. And what was that? Ashcroft's voice was steady, but too quiet. You were studying Lady Harrington, not as a lover studies his beloved, but as a, how did Crouch put it? A collector studies a specimen. You were documenting her secrets, her vulnerabilities, her indiscretions. You were building what you called, in your manuscript, an insurance policy. Lady Isabel gasped. Lionel, no. Let him finish, Isabel. Ashcroft's voice was ice. I'm curious to hear Mr. Poirot's theory. It is not theory, monsieur. It is fact. Poirot opened the manuscript Miss Marple had found. The Blackmailer's Art, your novel, or rather, your memoir disguised as fiction. In it, you describe in precise detail how a man might seduce lonely, wealthy women, collect evidence of their affairs, and then leverage that evidence for personal gain. It's fiction, is it? Then explain this notation in Crouch's journal, written the night before the murder. Overheard Mr. A speaking at Victoria Station. Called Lady H's most successful project yet. Mentioned leveraging secrets for advancement. Poirot looked up. You were not conducting a love affair, Mr. Ashcroft. You were conducting a scheme. That's absurd. I love Isabel. Do you? Or do you love what she represents? Access to society, to connections, to information you could not otherwise obtain. Poirot's voice was gentle, almost pitying. You are a writer of modest success, monsieur. Your books sell adequately, but not spectacularly. You live on the edge of poverty, maintaining appearances through charm and credit. You needed money, position. And Lady Harrington, young, naive, desperately unhappy, was your opportunity. Lord Harrington had gone rigid. You used my wife. Ashcroft stopped, seemed to recalculate. When he spoke again, his voice was different, harder, more honest. Yes. All right. Yes, I used her. Is that what you want to hear? I saw an opportunity, and I took it. A wealthy family. Connections to the ministry through Pike here. Social standing even in decline. Yes, I cultivated a relationship, but I didn't kill anyone. Then how do you explain this? Poirot read from Crouch's journal. Mr. A confronted me in corridor, said I was making a terrible mistake. Was that a threat? This was written at 8:45 p.m., Mr. Ashcroft, 30 minutes before Albert Crouch was murdered. So, I spoke with him. I tried to convince him he'd misunderstood what he'd overheard. That doesn't make me a murderer. No, but this does. Poirot produced a note found in Crouch's hand. This note, requesting a meeting at midnight. It is written on expensive stationery in a feminine hand. We all assumed it was Lady Harrington's handwriting. But examine it closely. The loops are similar, yes, but the pressure is different. The slant is slightly off. This is not Lady Harrington's natural hand. This is someone imitating her handwriting. Lady Isabel stared at the note. That's not mine. I didn't write that. I know, madam. Mr. Ashcroft wrote it. He had access to your letters, dozens of them, as we saw in your valise. He had samples of your handwriting. He could approximate it well enough to fool a man expecting to receive a note from you. Miss Marple spoke quietly. He sent the note to Albert Crouch, pretending it was from Lady Isabel. Albert thought she had listened to his warning and wished to discuss the situation privately. So he went to the meeting place, the baggage car, expecting Lady Isabel. Instead, he found Mr. Ashcroft, and Ashcroft killed him, Poirot finished, not with premeditation, perhaps not with a cold plan worked out in advance, but with desperation, because Albert Crouch was about to destroy everything, about to warn Lady Isabel, about to expose the scheme, about to ruin the careful work of months. You can't prove any of this. Ashcroft's composure had cracked. It's all speculation. Is it? Then explain how you knew the baggage car was unmonitored between 9 and 10 p.m. You wrote it in your notebook, your research notes. You documented the steward schedule precisely. You knew exactly when and where Crouch would be vulnerable. I was researching for my novel. A convenient excuse. But tell me, why did you steal Lord Harrington's letter opener 3 days before murder? Silence. You picked the lock on his writing case, a skill you learned researching your novels, perhaps? And you took the letter opener. Why? What did you plan to do with it? Ashcroft said nothing. I will tell you what you planned, Poirot continued. You planned to use it if necessary, as a weapon, as evidence to implicate Lord Harrington should anything go wrong. It was, as you would say, an insurance policy. He paused. But Albert Crouch forced your hand. He was going to expose you before you could complete your scheme. So you used the letter opener earlier than planned. You sent the fake note, lured him to the baggage car, and you killed him. And then, Miss Marple added gently, you searched his body for the journal you knew he kept. You found it in his pocket, but you couldn't take it with you immediately. Someone might see you leaving the baggage car, so you hid it in the smoking car compartment, meaning to retrieve it later and destroy it. But you made one mistake, Poirot said. You did not account for the 2 teacups. Ashcroft looked up sharply. What? The tea tray Albert Crouch delivered to Lady Harrington's compartment at 9 o'clock bore 2 cups. You assumed this was because Crouch suspected Lady Harrington was entertaining a visitor. But it was not. Crouch sent 2 cups because he expected to return later, to sit with Lady Harrington and warn her about you personally. The 2nd cup was for him. But he never returned, Miss Marple said, because you killed him first. Ashcroft stared at them both, his face a mass of calculation. Poirot could almost see his mind working, weighing options, considering escape routes. Finally, he laughed, a short, bitter sound. You're very clever, both of you. Very clever indeed. But cleverness isn't proof. You have theories, suspicions, circumstantial evidence. But you don't have proof. Don't I? Poirot reached into his pocket, produced a handkerchief. Wrapped inside was a single thread, dark blue, like the threads used in the carpet of the dining car, but also like the threads in Mr. Ashcroft's jacket. This was found on Albert Crouch's uniform, caught in the button of his jacket, where someone might grab him, where someone might struggle with him briefly before striking. He held it up to the lamplight. The forensic laboratories in London can compare this thread to the fabric of your jacket, monsieur. They can determine with scientific certainty whether it matches. And I think we both know what they will find. Ashcroft's face had gone gray. He stared at the thread as though it were a serpent. And there's one more thing, Poirot said softly. The smell. When I first boarded this train, I noticed lavender water in the corridor, very strong, as though someone had spilled it or used it to mask something else. At the time, I thought little of it, but now I understand. You wore lavender water, Mr. Ashcroft, the same scent Lady Harrington wears. You wore it deliberately when you went to meet Albert Crouch, so that if he caught your scent in the dim light of the baggage car, he would think, for just a moment, that you were Lady Harrington. That's why you could get close enough to strike, Miss Marple added. He wasn't expecting violence. He was expecting a frightened woman seeking advice. Ashcroft's hands were trembling now. He gripped the edge of the table as though it were the only solid thing in a tilting world. "You're building a gallows out of threads and sense and theories," he said, but his voice had lost its strength. No jury would convict on such evidence. Perhaps not on that alone, Poirot agreed, but combined with the journal entries, the forged note, the stolen letter opener, your own manuscript describing precisely this sort of scheme, and your complete inability to account for your movements during the crucial 30 minutes, he paused. I think a jury would find it quite compelling. The silence stretched. Outside, the fog had begun to lift, revealing the first gray hints of dawn. The train sat motionless on its tracks, a prison of wood and iron. Finally, Ashcroft spoke. His voice was different now, tired, defeated, almost relieved. "I didn't mean to kill him." Lady Isabel made a small, broken sound. "I mean that. I truly didn't mean to. I thought I could reason with him, make him see that what he'd overheard was misinterpreted. But he wouldn't listen. He said I was poison, that I destroyed everything I touched, that he'd been watching me for weeks, and he knew what I was." Ashcroft looked up, his eyes hollow. He said he was going to tell Isabel everything. That evening, he was going to sit with her over tea and explain exactly what kind of man I was, what I'd been planning. "So you killed him to preserve your scheme," Poirot said. "I killed him to preserve myself." The words burst out. "Do you know what it's like to be constantly on the edge? To watch wealthy, stupid people waste their money and their lives while you scrape and starve? I'm a better writer than half the successful hacks in London, but I can't get published because I don't have connections. I don't have money for the right clubs, the right dinners, the right—" He stopped, breathing hard. Isabel was my chance. Through her, I could meet the right people, get the right introductions. I wasn't going to blackmail her. That's not what the novel is about. It's about understanding that information is currency, and you would have used her secrets as currency, Miss Marple said quietly. Perhaps not directly against her, but certainly in service of your own advancement. That is still blackmail, Mr. Ashcroft, merely more sophisticated. I loved her. His voice broke. That part was real. I did love her. I still do. No. Lady Isabel's voice was cold, final. You love what I could give you. That's not the same thing at all. Ashcroft looked at her, and something in his face crumbled. Isabel, don't speak to me. Don't look at me. She turned away, tears streaming down her face. You made me believe. You made me think I was special, that someone finally saw me, understood me. But I was just a project, a means to an end. That's not true. It is true. Mrs. Finch spoke, her voice shaking with anger. I saw it. I saw how you watched her, studied her, took notes on her moods and her weaknesses. I thought you were a writer observing life, but you were a predator selecting prey. And when I wrote to Miss Marple asking for help, it was because I knew something terrible was going to happen. I just didn't know it would be this terrible. Lord Harrington had said nothing through all of this. Now he rose slowly, his face gray and aged. He walked to his wife, stood behind her chair, placed his hands gently on her shoulders. We'll get through this, he said quietly. Together. I've made mistakes, God knows I've made mistakes, but we'll face this together. Lady Isabel reached up, covered his hand with hers. She said nothing, but the gesture spoke volumes. Poirot turned to Thomas, who stood white-faced by the door. Please fetch the local constabulary. Mr. Ashcroft will be accompanying them to the station. As Thomas hurried away, Ashcroft slumped in his chair. All pretense of sophistication had fallen away, leaving only a tired, desperate man who had gambled everything and lost. I didn't plan to kill him, he said again, almost to himself. I thought I could make him understand. But he had that journal, and he said he was going to show it to everyone, and I grabbed the letter opener, and he stopped, covered his face with his hands. It was so fast. One moment we were arguing, and the next he was falling, and there was blood, and I couldn't undo it. No, Poirot said softly. One cannot undo murder. One can only face the consequences. Will they hang me? That is for the courts to decide, monsieur. But I think you know the answer. Ashcroft nodded slowly. He looked at Lady Isabel one last time. For what it's worth, the feelings were real, not the plan, perhaps not the calculated approach. But the feelings, those were real. It's worth nothing, she said without looking at him. Nothing at all. Nowhere Hollow. Dawn broke over Nowhere Hollow with the reluctant gray light of a world emerging from nightmare. The fog had lifted, revealing the small mining town in all its bleak ordinariness. Rows of identical houses, a church spire, the dark mouth of the coal works on the hillside. And above it all, on its lonely hill, Harrington Hall loomed like a Gothic reproach. The local police had arrived, a sergeant and 2 constables. Overwhelmed but efficient, they took Ashcroft into custody, recorded his confession with careful precision. Lord Harrington made arrangements for the train to continue to the station, where the passengers would be released to their various destinations. Poirot and Miss Marple stood on the platform of Nowhere Hollow Station, their investigation complete, waiting for the London train that would carry them home. It's a sad business, Miss Marple said, folding her knitting into her bag. All that pain and deception, and for what? Ambition without honor, love without trust. The saddest part, Poirot replied, is that it was all unnecessary. Mr. Ashcroft possessed genuine talent. His writing, his intelligence, these could have carried him far without resorting to manipulation. But he saw shortcuts where he should have seen dedication. Pride and impatience, the deadliest combination. Miss Marple watched as Lady Isabel and Lord Harrington climbed into a carriage together, heading toward the hall. Do you think they'll survive this? The marriage? I do not know, mademoiselle, but I think they have a chance now that truth has replaced deception. Whether that is enough? He shrugged. The human heart. It remains a mystery even to Hercule Poirot. Miss Marple smiled. How refreshingly honest of you, Mr. Poirot. Mrs. Finch approached them, her face drawn with exhaustion but also relief. I wanted to thank you both. If you hadn't been here, if that poor man had died and his killer had escaped, she shook her head, I would never have forgiven myself for not seeing the truth sooner. You saw enough to ask for help, Miss Marple assured her. That took courage. Did it? It felt like cowardice, like betrayal, asking a stranger to investigate my own household. You were protecting Lady Isabel, Poirot said. That is not betrayal. Though perhaps next time you'll trust your instincts sooner, non? Next time. Mrs. Finch managed a weak smile. God willing, there won't be a next time. She departed, leaving Poirot and Miss Marple alone once more. An interesting woman, Miss Marple observed. Devoted to the point of blindness, but ultimately willing to see truth when it mattered. Like many people, she saw what she wished to see until reality became impossible to ignore. Poirot adjusted his hat with precise care. It is a human condition, I think, this capacity for self-deception. Indeed, though I found that village life tends to cure one of such illusions rather quickly. One cannot maintain comfortable fictions when one's neighbors know every detail of one's existence. She paused. That's why I've stayed in St. Mary Mead all these years, you know. Not because I lack imagination or ambition, but because I find the concentrated humanity of a small place endlessly instructive. Every passion, every sin, every virtue, they all play out in miniature, but no less intensely. And yet you left St. Mary Mead to come here, because Mrs. Finch needed help, and because she smiled. Because even in a small village, one occasionally craves a change of scenery. And what did you think of your adventure, mademoiselle? Your first murder investigation alongside Hercule Poirot. I found it illuminating, Mr. Poirot. Your logical methods complement my own observational approach quite nicely. You see patterns in evidence. I see patterns in human behavior. Together, we see the whole picture. A formidable combination. Poirot bowed slightly. Perhaps we shall work together again someday. I hope not, Mr. Poirot, because that would mean another murder, and I find myself quite weary of death. But if circumstances should require it, she extended her hand. I would be honored to assist. They shook hands formally, two professionals acknowledging mutual respect. The London train arrived with a blast of steam and a shriek of whistle. Poirot boarded, found his first-class compartment, arranged himself with meticulous care. As the train pulled away from Nowhere Hollow, he watched the small town recede into the distance. Ordinary houses, ordinary people, hiding extraordinary darkness. Nowhere Hollow, he murmured to himself. A curious name for a curious place. But then, I think perhaps every place is nowhere until something happens to make it somewhere. And here, in this small, forgotten town, justice has been served. Order has been restored to disorder. And that, after all, is what matters. He closed his eyes, permitted himself the luxury of satisfaction. The little gray cells had triumphed once more. Miss Marple's return. Miss Marple's southbound train departed 3 hours after Poirot's, giving her time to sit with Mrs. Finch at Harrington Hall and offer what comfort she could. The great house was cold and dim, its genteel decay more apparent in daylight. Paint peeled from window frames. Carpet showed threadbare patches, and the portraits of Harrington ancestors stared down from the walls with expressions of disappointed reproach. Lady Isabel sat in the morning room, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders despite the fire burning in the grate. She looked fragile, breakable, a woman who had believed herself strong until reality had shattered that illusion. "I was such a fool," she said quietly, staring into the flames. "To believe someone like Lionel could love someone like me." "You weren't a fool," Miss Marple said gently, settling into the chair across from her. "You were lonely. There's a difference." "Is there?" "I betrayed my husband, my marriage vows, my own sense of honor, all because I was lonely." "Loneliness makes people vulnerable to those who would exploit them." Mr. Ashcroft understood this. He made a study of vulnerability the way others study mathematics or music. You were not his first victim, and if he'd succeeded, you would not have been his last. Lady Isabel looked up, her eyes red-rimmed. "Mrs. Finch told me you've seen this sort of thing before. In your village." "Unfortunately, yes. Human nature doesn't change much from place to place. The ambitious prey upon the vulnerable. the desperate upon the trusting, the clever upon the naive. What varies is the setting and the scale, but the essential patterns remain the same. What happened in your village, to the people who were preyed upon? Miss Marple considered her answer carefully. Some survived and grew stronger. They learned to recognize manipulation, to trust their instincts, to value their own worth. Others, she paused, others never quite recovered. They remained broken in ways that time could not heal. Which will I be? That, my dear, is entirely up to you. Miss Marple set down her knitting, leaned forward. You've suffered a terrible betrayal. Your trust has been violated, your judgment questioned, your heart bruised. But you're still here. You're still breathing, still thinking, still capable of making choices. What you do with this experience, whether you let it destroy you or strengthen you, that is your decision to make. Charles wants to try again, to make the marriage work properly this time. Lady Isabel's voice was uncertain. Do you think that's possible? After everything? I think it's possible if both of you are honest about what you want and what you're willing to give. Your marriage began on a foundation of convenience rather than affection. Perhaps now it can be rebuilt on something more solid. Mutual respect, honest communication, shared purpose. That sounds very rational. But I don't feel rational. I feel angry and humiliated and lost. Those are perfectly reasonable feelings. But they will pass, or at least soften. And when they do, you'll need to decide what kind of life you want to build. Miss Marple picked up her knitting once more. There was a young woman in St. Mary Mead, Griselda Clement, before she married the vicar. She'd been engaged to a young man who used her quite shamefully, then abandoned her for someone with more money. She was devastated, convinced her life was over. But she recovered, found genuine love with our dear vicar, and now she's one of the happiest people I know. Not because she forgot the past, but because she refused to let the past define her future. Lady Isabel was quiet for a long moment. Did you ever, forgive me for asking, did you ever love someone who betrayed you? Miss Marple smiled a little sadly. Yes, a long time ago. I thought he was everything I'd ever wanted. He was handsome, charming, attentive. And then I discovered he'd been courting me while secretly engaged to someone else, someone with a larger fortune. She shrugged. I was heartbroken at the time. I thought I would never recover. But I did, and I learned to recognize the warning signs of insincerity, which has served me quite well over the years. You never married. No, but I've had a full life nonetheless. Love takes many forms, my dear. Romantic love is only one, and not always the most fulfilling. She gestured around the room. You have Mrs. Finch, who loves you like a daughter. You have your husband, who, despite everything, is willing to try again. You have staff who depend on you, a household that needs you, a position in society that matters. These things count for something. Mrs. Finch entered with a tea tray, her face still showing signs of strain, but also determination. I've made your favorite, my lady, Earl Grey with lemon. Thank you, Mrs. Finch. Lady Isabel accepted the cup with a small smile. I don't know what I would do without you. You'll never have to find out, my dear. I'll always be here. Mrs. Finch poured tea for Miss Marple as well. Though I must say, Miss Marple, your presence these past few days has been invaluable. I don't know how you and Mr. Poirot managed to solve such a complex case so quickly. Mr. Poirot solved the case, Miss Marple corrected gently. I merely provided context and perhaps a feminine perspective on certain matters. You provided far more than that, Lady Isabel said. You provided wisdom, kindness, understanding without judgment. She set down her teacup. I want you to know, whatever happens with the marriage, whatever I decide, I'm grateful you were here. You made me feel less alone. You're not alone, my dear. You never were. You simply forgot for a time to look around and see who was standing beside you. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. 3 women of different generations sharing tea and the unspoken understanding that comes from shared crisis. Outside, the gray day was brightening slightly, though the cold smoke from the mine still hung heavy over Nowhere Hollow. Eventually, Miss Marple rose, gathering her belongings. I should go. My train departs in an hour, and I don't want to miss it. Lady Isabel stood as well, impulsively embraced the older woman. Thank you for everything. Take care of yourself, my dear. And remember, strength isn't about never falling. It's about getting up again after you fall. Mrs. Finch walked Miss Marple to the waiting carriage. As they stood on the steps of Harrington Hall, the governess said quietly, Do you think she'll be all right? Truly, I think she has a fighting chance. Whether she takes it. Miss Marple shrugged. That's up to her. We can only offer support and wisdom. We cannot live people's lives for them. No, but I wish we could. Sometimes it would be so much easier. Easier, yes, but not better. People must make their own choices, their own mistakes, forge their own paths. That's what makes them people rather than puppets. The carriage ride to the station was quiet, giving Miss Marple time to reflect on the case. It had been, in many ways, a typical example of human folly, ambition overriding morality, manipulation disguised as love, desperation leading to violence. She'd seen it all before in St. Mary Mead, just in different forms. But there was something about this case that troubled her. Something about Lionel Ashcroft's face when he confessed, the genuine pain mixed with the calculation. Had he truly loved Lady Isabel, even while using her, could love and manipulation coexist in the same heart? She thought of her own youthful disappointment. The man who had courted her while engaged to another. Had he felt any genuine affection for her, or had it all been pretense? She'd never know, and perhaps, she thought, that was for the best. Some questions were better left unanswered. At the station, she found Poirot's train had long since departed. She felt a small pang of, not loneliness exactly, but something adjacent to it. It had been pleasant, working alongside someone who understood the importance of observation, of patience, of allowing the truth to reveal itself gradually. She boarded her own train, found a compartment, settled in with her knitting. The blue scarf was nearly finished now. She'd give to the vicar's wife. She decided. Griselda always complained about the drafts in the vicarage. As the train pulled away from Nowhere Hollow, Miss Marple looked out the window one last time at the gray town, the looming hall, the smoke-stained sky, and she thought, not for the first time, how fortunate she was to live in St. Mary Mead, where the murders, when they occurred, at least happened among people she knew, though that, she reflected with a slight smile, made them no less deadly, only more personal. The train gathered speed, and Nowhere Hollow disappeared into the distance, becoming what its name suggested. Nowhere, a hollow place, already fading into memory. But Miss Marple would remember. She always remembered, because every case, every crime, every human tragedy taught her something new about the infinitely variable patterns of human nature. And in a long life devoted to observation, learning never ceased. The aftermath. 3 weeks later, Hercule Poirot received a letter at his flat in Whitehaven Mansions. The envelope was expensive, cream-colored, bearing the Harrington crest. Inside were two items: a formal thank-you note from Lord Harrington and a separate letter from Lady Isabel. Lord Harrington's note was brief and dignified. Dear Mr. Poirot, I write to express my profound gratitude for your work in solving the terrible crime that occurred on the train to Nowhere Hollow. Your discretion and efficiency in this matter have been beyond reproach. Asterisk, I am pleased to inform you that Lady Isabel and I are working to repair our marriage. It is not easy, and I do not know if we will succeed, but we are trying. That is something. Asterisk, I have enclosed a check for your services, though I know no amount of money can truly compensate for what you have done. With deepest respect, Charles Harrington. The check, Poirot noted, was generous but not extravagant. A man paying for services rendered, not attempting to buy silence or favor. Lady Isabel's letter was longer, more personal. Dear Mr. Poirot, asterisk, I struggle with whether to write to you. Part of me wants to forget everything that happened on that terrible journey. The betrayal, the murder, the humiliation of learning how thoroughly I had been deceived. But Miss Marple told me before she left that forgetting is not the same as healing, and that sometimes we must face our mistakes squarely before we can move past them. Asterisk. So I write to thank you and also to apologize. My foolishness, my vanity, my desperate need to be seen and valued, these things created the circumstances that led to Albert Crouch's death. If I had been stronger, wiser, less selfish, perhaps he would still be alive. Asterisk, I know you will tell me that I did not kill him, that Lionel Ashcroft alone bears that guilt. And intellectually, I understand this. But emotionally, I carry the weight of knowing that my choices had consequences I never intended. Asterisk, Charles and I are trying to build something honest from the ruins of our dishonest marriage. It is painful, awkward work. We are like strangers learning to speak a common language. But we are trying, and Miss Marple says that effort counts for something. Asterisk, I have burned all of Lionel's letters. I wanted to keep them, not out of lingering affection, but as a reminder of my own capacity for self-deception. But Mrs. Finch convinced me that some lessons are better learned and then released. So I burned them, and with them I hope the worst of my shame. Asterisk, thank you for seeing the truth when I could not. Thank you for your kindness in the midst of judgment. And thank you for reminding me that honor, real honor, is not about appearances but about actions. Asterisk, with sincere gratitude, Lady Isabel Harrington. Poirot read both letters twice, then folded them carefully and placed them in his desk drawer where he kept correspondence from solved cases. He would not answer them immediately. Some letters require reflection before response. He walked to his window, looked out over London. The city stretched before him in all its complexity. Millions of lives, millions of secrets, millions of small deceptions and desperate acts playing out in the shadows. And somewhere in that vast city, in prisons and courtrooms, Lionel Ashcroft awaited trial for murder. Poirot had attended the preliminary hearing. Ashcroft had pleaded guilty, sparing everyone the ordeal of a prolonged trial. His barrister had argued for mercy on the grounds that the killing had not been premeditated, that it had occurred in a moment of panic. The judge had been unmoved. Murder was murder, whatever the circumstances. Ashcroft would hang. Poirot felt no satisfaction in this knowledge. Justice, necessary though it was, brought no joy. It merely restored balance to a world momentarily tilted toward chaos. The dead remained dead, the betrayed remained betrayed, and the consequences of human weakness rippled outward like stones thrown into still water. "C'est la vie," he murmured to the empty room. "Such is life. We build our little towers of ambition and desire, and we are always surprised when they collapse upon us." His manservant, George, appeared in the doorway. "Sir, you have another visitor. A Miss Marple. She says she doesn't have an appointment, but she was passing by and thought she might call." Poirot's eyebrows rose in genuine pleasure. "Show her in, George. And bring tea. The good tea, not the everyday. And perhaps some of those little cakes from the French pâtisserie." "Very good, sir." Miss Marple appeared a moment later, neat and unassuming as ever, her knitting bag over one arm. "I hope I'm not intruding, Mr. Poirot. I had business in London, my solicitor, tedious matters, and I thought I might call. We didn't properly say goodbye at Nowhere Hollow." "You are always welcome, mademoiselle. Please sit. George is bringing tea." They settled into comfortable chairs by the fire. Miss Marple produced her knitting, a new project, a yellow blanket this time, and began the familiar rhythm of needles and wool. "I received a letter from Mrs. Finch," she said. "She says Lady Isabel and Lord Harrington are managing as well as can be expected. The scandal has been considerable. People love to gossip about titled families in distress, but they're weathering it together." As the train pulled away from Nowhere Hollow, Miss Marple looked out the window one last time at the gray town, the looming hall, the smoke-stained sky. And she thought, not for the first time, how fortunate she was to live in St. Mary Mead, where the murders, when they occurred, at least happened among people she knew, though that, she reflected with a slight smile, made them no less deadly, only more personal. The train gathered speed, and Nowhere Hollow disappeared into the distance, becoming what its name suggested. Nowhere, a hollow place, already fading into memory. But Miss Marple would remember. She always remembered, because every case, every crime, every human tragedy taught her something new about the infinitely variable patterns of human nature. And in a long life devoted to observation, learning never ceased. The aftermath. 3 weeks later, Hercule Poirot received a letter at his flat in Whitehaven Mansions. The envelope was expensive, cream-colored, bearing the Harrington crest. Inside were 2 items, a formal thank-you note from Lord Harrington and a separate letter from Lady Isabel. Lord Harrington's note was brief and dignified. "Dear Mr. Poirot, I write to express my profound gratitude for your work in solving the terrible crime that occurred on the train to Nowhere Hollow. Your discretion and efficiency in this matter have been beyond reproach. I am pleased to inform you that Lady Isabel and I are working to repair our marriage. It is not easy, and I do not know if it will succeed, but we are trying. That is something. I have enclosed a check for your services, though I know no amount of money can truly compensate for what you have done. With deepest respect, Charles Harrington." The check, Poirot noted, was generous but not extravagant. A man paying for services rendered, not attempting to buy silence or favor. Lady Isabel's letter was longer, more personal. "Dear Mr. Poirot, I struggle with whether to write to you. Part of me wants to forget everything that happened on that terrible journey. The betrayal, the murder, the humiliation of learning how thoroughly I had been deceived. But Miss Marple told me before she left that forgetting is not the same as healing, and that sometimes we must face our mistakes squarely before we can move past them. So I write to thank you and also to apologize. My foolishness, my vanity, my desperate need to be seen and valued, these things created the circumstances that led to Albert Crouch's death. If I had been stronger wiser, less selfish. Perhaps he would still be alive. Asterisk. Asterisk. I know you will tell me that I did not kill him. That Lionel Ashcroft alone bears that guilt. And intellectually, I understand this. But emotionally, I carry the weight of knowing that my choices had consequences I never intended. Asterisk. Asterisk Charles and I are trying to build something honest from the ruins of our dishonest marriage. It is painful, awkward work. We are like strangers learning to speak a common language. But we are trying, and Miss Marple says that effort counts for something. Asterisk. Asterisk, I have burned all of Lionel's letters. I wanted to keep them, not out of lingering affection, but as a reminder of my own capacity for self-deception. But Mrs. Finch convinced me that some lessons are better learned and then released. So I burned them, and with them I hope the worst of my shame. Asterisk. Asterisk, thank you for seeing the truth when I could not. Thank you for your kindness in the midst of judgment. And thank you for reminding me that honor, real honor, is not about appearances but about actions. Asterisk. With sincere gratitude. Lady Isabel Harrington. Poirot read both letters twice, then folded them carefully and placed them in his desk drawer where he kept correspondence from solved cases. He would not answer them immediately. Some letters require reflection before response. He walked to his window, looked out over London. The city stretched before him in all its complexity. Millions of lives, millions of secrets, millions of small deceptions and desperate acts playing out in the shadows. And somewhere in that vast city, in prisons and courtrooms, Lionel Ashcroft awaited trial for murder. Poirot had attended the preliminary hearing. Ashcroft had pleaded guilty, sparing everyone the ordeal of a prolonged trial. His barrister had argued for mercy on the grounds that the killing had not been premeditated, that it had occurred in a moment of panic. The judge had been unmoved. Murder was murder, whatever the circumstances. Ashcroft would hang. Poirot felt no satisfaction in this knowledge. Justice, necessary though it was, brought no joy. It merely restored balance to a world momentarily tilted toward chaos. The dead remained dead, the betrayed remained betrayed, and the consequences of human weakness rippled outward like stones thrown into still water. "C'est la vie," he murmured to the empty room. Such is life. We build our little towers of ambition and desire, and we are always surprised when they collapse upon us. His manservant, George, appeared in the doorway. "Sir, you have another visitor. A Miss Marple. She says she doesn't have an appointment, but she was passing by and thought she might call." Poirot's eyebrows rose in genuine pleasure. "Show her in, George. And bring tea. The good tea, not the everyday. And perhaps some of those little cakes from the French patisserie." "Very good, sir." Miss Marple appeared a moment later, neat and unassuming as ever, her knitting bag over one arm. "I hope I'm not intruding, Mr. Poirot. I had business in London, my solicitor, tedious matters, and I thought I might call. We didn't properly say goodbye at Nowhere Hollow. You are always welcome, mademoiselle. Please sit. George is bringing tea." They settled into comfortable chairs by the fire. Miss Marple produced her knitting, a new project, a yellow blanket this time, and began the familiar rhythm of needles and wool. "I received a letter from Mrs. Finch," she said. "She says Lady Isabel and Lord Harrington are managing as well as can be expected. The scandal has been considerable. People love to gossip about titled families in distress, but they're weathering it together. I received letters also," Poirot replied. "Quite touching, both of them. The husband trying to be honorable, the wife trying to be honest. One hopes it is enough. Hope is often all we have." Miss Marple examined a stitch. I've been thinking about Mr. Ashcroft, about how someone so intelligent could make such catastrophic errors of judgment. Intelligence and wisdom are not the same thing, mademoiselle. Intelligence can be used in service of folly just as easily as in service of virtue. Ashcroft was clever, but he lacked moral imagination. He could not see people as ends in themselves, only as means to his ends. A failure of empathy, then. Precisely. He could study people, analyze them, predict their behaviors. But he could not feel with them, could not understand that their pain mattered as much as his ambition. Poirot steepled his fingers. It is a great flaw of the manipulator. They see only surfaces, never depths. And yet, Miss Marple said thoughtfully, I wonder if he truly believed himself incapable of love, if he convinced himself that his feelings for Lady Isabel were merely strategic, when in fact they were genuine but inconvenient. You think he loved her? I think he might have, which makes the tragedy even greater. To find genuine feeling in the midst of calculated deception, and to be unable to distinguish one from the other. She shook her head. What a torment that must be. You are generous in your assessment, mademoiselle. Not generous. Realistic. People are rarely purely evil or purely good. They're usually some confused mixture of both, trying to navigate life without a reliable map. She paused as George brought in the tea tray. Thank you, this is lovely. They sat in companionable silence for a while, drinking tea, lost in their own thoughts. Finally, Poirot said, You know, mademoiselle, when I first met you on that train, I thought you were simply a kind elderly lady traveling to visit a friend. I did not anticipate that you would be— He searched for the word. Formidable. Miss Marple smiled. People often underestimate elderly spinsters. It's one of our great advantages. We can observe without being observed, question without being questioned, and reach conclusions without being suspected of reaching them. A perfect disguise. Not a disguise, Mr. Poirot. Merely a truth that people choose not to see. They look at an old woman with knitting needles, and they think, harmless, naive, limited by provincial experience. They don't think, decades of human observation, intimate knowledge of human nature, and a mind that misses nothing. I shall not make that mistake again. I should hope not. She finished her tea, set down the cup. I've enjoyed this, Mr. Poirot. Our investigation, our conversations, this visit. It's reminded me that the world is larger than St. Mary Mead, even if the essential truths remain the same wherever one goes. Perhaps we shall work together again. Perhaps, though I do hope the circumstances are less tragic next time. I share that hope, mademoiselle, but I fear that as long as humans possess ambition, pride, and the capacity for self-deception, there will always be tragic circumstances requiring investigation. How pessimistic of you. Not pessimistic. Realistic. He smiled, but also hopeful, because as long as there are people like us, people who care about truth, about justice, about restoring order to chaos, there is hope that the darkness will not prevail entirely. Well said, Mr. Poirot. Miss Marple gathered her knitting, prepared to leave. I must return to St. Mary Mead. The vicar's wife is expecting me for dinner, and I promise to help her with the church flower arrangements. Life continues, you see, even after murder. Indeed it does. That is perhaps the most comforting and the most disturbing truth of all. Poirot walked her to the door, helped her into her coat. Travel safely, Miss Marple, and if you ever require assistance, if another case presents itself in your village, please do not hesitate to call upon Hercule Poirot. And if you require someone to observe the human elements your logic might miss, you know where to find me. They shook hands, two unlikely allies united by their devotion to truth. After she left, Poirot returned to his chair by the fire. He picked up Lady Isabel's letter, read it once more. The pain in her words was palpable, but so was the determination to do better, to be better. Perhaps that was all any of them could do, recognize their failures, accept their consequences, and try, however awkwardly, to move forward with greater wisdom. The fire crackled. The clock ticked. London hummed with life outside his window, and Hercule Poirot, satisfied that justice had been served and order restored, permitted himself the luxury of peace. For now, there would be other cases, other mysteries, other confrontations with human darkness. That was certain. But for this moment, in this quiet room, with the taste of good tea lingering on his tongue and the memory of an unlikely friendship warming his heart, all was well. Bien, he murmured to himself. Tres bien. And he closed his eyes and allowed himself to rest. 6 months later, the trial of Lionel Ashcroft was brief. He had confessed. The evidence was overwhelming, and his barrister's pleas for mercy fell on deaf ears. The judge, in passing sentence, spoke of the sacred trust between servant and employer, of the heinous nature of calculated murder, of the particular cruelty of killing a man who sought only to protect the vulnerable. Lionel Ashcroft was hanged on a gray morning in early spring. He went to his death with dignity, if not with repentance. His last words, reported in the papers, were, "I was not wrong to want more. I was only wrong in how I pursued it." The newspapers made a sensation of the case. The blackmailer's end, murder on the fog-bound express, the writer who wrote his own death warrant. The public devoured every detail, though the Harrington family was spared the worst of the scrutiny through judicious legal interventions. Lady Isabel Harrington did not attend the execution. She and Lord Harrington had retreated to Harrington Hall, where they lived quietly, working to rebuild their marriage brick by brick. Mrs. Finch reported to Miss Marple that progress was slow but genuine. They took meals together, walked the grounds, spoke honestly about their failures and hopes. It was not romance, but it was something perhaps more durable, partnership. Lord Harrington had stopped drinking. Lady Isabel had taken up painting. Together, they worked to modernize the estate, to find new sources of income, to adapt to a changing world. It would never be what it once was. The glory days of the Harrington family were long past, but it might yet be something worthwhile. Edwin Pike, the nervous civil servant, received a commendation from the ministry for his handling of a difficult situation on the train. His documents, it turned out, had never been stolen at all, merely disarranged by his own nervous shuffling. He remained at his post, still anxious, still convinced disaster lurked around every corner. Some people, Miss Marple reflected, were born to worry.